What just happened in the Strait of Hormuz could definitely end the fate of global oil through that strait, and almost no one is talking about it. Right here on this map is a 21-mile gap that controls nearly 20% of the world's energy. It looks small, almost insignificant, but every single day nearly 20% of the world's oil is forced to pass through this exact gap. That means 1 out of every 5 barrels powering cars, factories, and entire economies must squeeze through this corridor. Now imagine something different. No explosions, no official declaration of war, no dramatic headlines at first, just silence. Ships stop moving, oil stops flowing. Within hours, global markets react. Within days, prices surge, supply chains begin to crack, and countries thousands of miles away start feeling the pressure. This is the Strait of Hormuz, and right now, what is happening here could quietly decide the future of the global economy. To understand why, you need to zoom out. The global energy system is not balanced. It is concentrated. Oil is produced in a few key regions, but consumed everywhere. When you map those flows, something becomes clear. Massive volumes of energy are forced through a handful of narrow choke points. And among all of them, Hormuz is the most critical. It is not just a shipping route, it is a gate. Whoever controls or disrupts that gate holds leverage over countries that depend on it. But here is the problem. Geography has turned this gate into one of the most dangerous places on Earth. Now zoom back in. The Persian Gulf is essentially a dead-end basin. All the oil from Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq, and the United Arab Emirates has only one way out. Every tanker must pass through Hormuz before reaching open ocean. On one side lies the Arabian Peninsula, flat, open, and exposed. On the other side lies Iran, and this is where everything changes. The Iranian coastline is not simple. It is rugged, mountainous, and filled with hidden inlets and elevated positions overlooking the strait. From above, it resembles a natural fortress watching every movement below. And in a corridor this narrow distance does not matter. Anything launched from shore can reach ships in minutes. This is where strategy begins to take shape. Instead of trying to match large navies ship for ship, Iran built a different approach. It focused on asymmetry, fast attack boats, naval mines, shore-based missile systems, and unmanned drones. The logic is simple. You do not need to dominate the entire ocean. You only need to make one choke point too dangerous to pass. And if that choke point happens to carry 1/5 of the world's oil, the impact becomes global. And then something changed. Reports began to emerge of naval mines being deployed across the strait. Not in a clean, controlled grid, but irregularly. Some anchored to the seabed, others drifting with currents, some triggered by direct contact, others activated by sound or magnetic signals. Now imagine this from above. A narrow corridor, already under tension, suddenly becomes an invisible maze. Ships cannot see the threat. They cannot predict it. One wrong move, one miscalculation, and the entire passage shuts down. This is where the United States enters the scene. Recently, American naval forces moved through the strait in a highly visible operation. Guided missile destroyers crossed the corridor under intense surveillance, sending a clear message that the passage would not be abandoned. But those ships were only the surface layer of a much deeper strategy. Because what followed was not just a show of force, it was the beginning of a race to restore control before the situation spiraled further. Now shift your focus below the surface, because this is where the real battle begins. The greatest threat in Hormuz is not visible from the sky. It is hidden underwater. This is where autonomous systems come into play. Unmanned underwater vehicles designed specifically for mine detection begin scanning the seabed. Slowly and methodically, they map the chaos. Each detected object is analyzed, classified, and if necessary, neutralized. It is a slow process. There are no dramatic explosions or visible victories, but this silent operation determines whether the strait lives or dies. But here is the problem. Clearing mines in a narrow, contested waterway is one of the most dangerous naval operations in the world. Every movement must be precise. Every detection must be accurate, and all of it happens under the constant possibility of escalation. Because while one side is trying to clear the path, the other can attempt to complicate it again. Now step back and look at the bigger picture. This is no longer just a regional issue. The Strait of Hormuz is a global artery. When it is threatened, the impact spreads instantly across continents. Europe feels the pressure almost immediately. Energy prices rise, industries slow, supply chains tighten, but the real shock travels east, where entire economies depend heavily on energy imports passing through this exact corridor. Countries like China, Japan, South Korea, and India rely on this flow to sustain industrial production. When that flow is disrupted, the effects are immediate. Factories slow down, refineries draw from reserves, governments begin scrambling for alternatives. But here is the reality. Alternatives are limited, expensive, and slow to scale. Look at the map again. Ships can reroute around Africa through the Cape of Good Hope, but that adds thousands of miles, extra fuel costs, and significant delays. The Suez Canal offers another route, but it is already operating near its limits and faces its own security challenges. In practical terms, there is no perfect substitute. Hormuz remains the fastest and most efficient route. And that makes it irreplaceable in the short term, but this creates a dangerous paradox. The same disruption that gives leverage also creates instability for everyone involved, even for the side attempting to use it as a strategic advantage. Because the longer the strait remains unstable, the more the rest of the world begins adapting. Investments in alternative routes accelerate. Energy diversification becomes a priority. Over time, dependence on this narrow corridor could decrease, and this is where the situation becomes even more complex. Because while the short-term impact is severe, the long-term consequences could reshape global energy dynamics entirely. What begins as a strategic move can slowly turn into a structural shift. Now bring the focus back to the United States. The recent operations are not random. They are part of a broader effort to ensure that the strait remains open, or at least controllable. Not just through ships, but through systems. Surveillance networks, coordination with allies, and rapid response capabilities all play a role. The goal is not only to react to threats, but to reduce uncertainty before it turns into crisis. But even with all these capabilities, the risks remain. The narrowness of the strait compresses time and space. Decisions must be made within seconds. A single miscalculation, a single unexpected incident can escalate quickly, and in a place this critical, even a small disruption can trigger a global reaction. And that is what makes Hormuz different from almost any other location on Earth. It is not just strategically important, it is fragile. It is a place where geography amplifies every action. A place where small changes create massive consequences. Now consider one more layer. While the world focuses on the immediate tension, other global players are watching closely. Because disruptions in one region create opportunities in another. Rising oil prices benefit exporters elsewhere. New routes become economically viable. Long-term projects that once seemed too costly suddenly become attractive. This is how global dynamics shift, not through a single dramatic event, but through a chain reaction triggered by pressure at key points. And Hormuz is one of those points. So when you look at this narrow strip of water, you are not just looking at a shipping lane, you are looking at a pressure point in the global system, a place where geography, economics, and strategy collide in real time. And this leads to a critical question. What happens if the strait does not just face temporary disruption, but sustained instability? Not for days, but for weeks or even months. How does the world adapt? How quickly can alternative systems scale? And what does that mean for the balance of power? Because the reality is simple. The stability we experience every day depends on continuous flow. Energy moves, goods move, systems function. And when that flow is interrupted at a critical point, the effects are immediate and widespread. The Strait of Hormuz is that critical point, a 21-mile gap carrying a disproportionate share of global energy. A place where small changes can send shockwaves across continents. The world is not just watching Hormuz, it is depending on it. And as tensions continue to rise, the importance of this narrow corridor becomes impossible to ignore. Because in the end, power is not just about size or strength, it is about position. And right now, one of the most important positions on Earth is this narrow stretch of water. If it stays open, the system holds. If it closes, even briefly, the consequences ripple across the entire planet. And that is why this place matters more than it seems, because sometimes the smallest point on the map controls everything. If you found this breakdown insightful, make sure to hit that like button. It helps us keep the lights on and the research moving. Share this video with someone, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the forces that shape our world. Thanks for watching.